Hello, London. We are ready for your vote.
Hello, I'm Stephen Perkins, and this is Douzepois, the Eurovision podcast from the team behind Binge Watch. Right now, it is Tuesday, the 7th of May. It is 10:28 p.m. I've just watched the Eurovision semi-final number one, and so what better time than the middle of the night, practically, to sit here and do a quick analysis of everything that we've just witnessed. And I'm delighted to be joined once again by producer Liam. Liam, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Stephen. Yes, I am with you in spirit for this semi-final. So I've had the day in Norwich just to give people some unnecessary backstory to my life today. So I missed most of the performances. So I'm very excited to find out your thoughts on them. I am, however, in the spirit of Eurovision, enjoying a little tipple while we record this.
Was it song number 9? Have you tickle? Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk a little bit about everything that happened. I think first and foremost, I just want to talk about the results we've just witnessed, because for me, what was strange was when they started reading out the results, I was like, have they got the right sheet of paper there? Because the first 3, I think, that they announced were all sort of 3 that I kind of had down as non-qualifiers. So when the first ones they announced through were like Serbia, Portugal, and Slovenia, I was like, oh, okay, this is not going the way I expected it to. But then that's the joy of Eurovision, is that the vote never goes the way I expected it to. There's always a curveball in there somewhere.
Yeah, do you know what? I think we had the same conversation last year in that they announced the favourites towards the end. And I kind of see the logic for both in that you start off with a couple of outsiders and then it sort of shakes things up a little bit. However, I also kind of feel like when you leave Croatia and Finland and Ireland to the last few, the element of sort of unpredictability is kind of gone because you know they're going to be there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the speculation today about who was going to be the last one announced through, I think a lot of people were saying Ireland just because obviously they haven't qualified for quite a while, and you know it would have been such an upset tonight if they hadn't got through. So, but I can understand totally why they left Luxembourg till the end, because that was kind of the borderline one. I think obviously everyone was rooting, certainly everyone in the arena was rooting for Luxembourg to kind of stage their dramatic comeback, and I was always a bit kind of borderline with that one, because I mean I threw them a pity vote myself, but I was sat there going, the conversation we literally just had in my living room was that, like, if this wasn't their big return after 30 odd years and they hadn't been put on last, would they be getting through with that song? Probably not.
I agree. I think, you know, it was a big return, 30 odd years, and it kind of felt like they had to put them through because it would have, like, they'd have gone. I think they never would have seen Luxembourg again if they didn't.
Yeah, exactly. You always see Martin Osterdahl out there in the corridor chucking a few votes in just in case. It's a joke. Don't sue me, anyone. But yeah, let's shall we have a little talk through the big moments of the night?
Yeah, let's do it. I have to say, I actually, before we get started on the performances, the host tonight, kudos to her. She was brilliant, from what I saw. So yes, fantastic job.
Yeah, I mean, Petra Mede, obviously, you know, Eurovision royalty at this point, absolutely brilliant. Knows exactly what she's doing. You know, brilliant comedy, brilliant hosting. Marlene Ockerman, I thought she looked quite nervous. I think you could tell this was a little bit outside of her comfort zone. But I think she did a fine job, and I think it'll be one of those things where by the time we get to Saturday and she'll have 2 shows under her belt, she'll be flying by that point. But you could slightly see the nerves with her, particularly when, if Petra was off somewhere else and Marlene was on the stage on her own, you could sort of see her thinking, I want my friend back here. But yeah, I mean, the thing about Sweden is you say what you like about them, but they know how to put a Eurovision on. I mean, it was, in terms of just having, you know, fun things to happen when they were trying to fill an ad break. You know, that little like grinder skit that they did was great. They had, you know, and they had some great moments with like getting Johnny Logan out, getting Benjamin Ingrosso to perform. Fantastic. And I mean, we had a lovely opener with Eleni Ferreira, and then we had Eric Sada, and then kind of bless them, they kind of felt like they were the warm-up act for Chanel to come out and absolutely wipe the floor with both of them. I thought, I mean, she's just, you know, there's something just pneumatic about that woman and the way she performs, and you know, I always slightly feel for her, because I feel like in in another year she could have walked a win easily, and she was just kind of unlucky that she was kind of the same year as Ukraine being the inevitable winner, and also UK having a unexpected resurgence. But
yeah. Well, on the subject of the UK, very tenuous link there. I want to know your thoughts on Ireland, because they've been surging up the bookies sort of rankings in the last few weeks. They're now a solid top 10, and they qualified tonight. This is very unconventional Ireland. Did their performance live up to expectation?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, that Ireland were the event of the night. I mean, I normally my process for Eurovision is that I try to avoid as much of the songs as I can up until the semi-finals. Then, obviously, since I started doing this podcast, I've not been able to do that because I've had to, because I had things to talk about. So now my process is that although I listen to all the songs, I try to avoid finding out too much about the staging, so I've at least got some surprises waiting for me on the night. And I was just hearing so many things about what Ireland had planned, and I was like, I can't wait to see this one. And it just did not disappoint at all. There was so much going on, and it was, I mean, the thing that I loved, I sat there going, this is airing at like 8:30 on BBC One, and it's like something out of Dracula. It's just, there's all of this kind of witchcraft and demonic imagery and things happening, and pentagrams on the floor and all this sort of stuff, and lighting candles, and a big reveal where their dress melts and suddenly they're in this this like trans flag bikini type thing, and I'm just I mean the whole thing was you could sort of see that Ireland had stepped back this year and gone, you know what we've been trying the last few years has not been working, so let's just do something very, very different. And if it doesn't work, then all we've done is we've just added an extra year onto our losing streak. But this year, I think I still don't think it's an outright winner, but I think they have they've sort of come from being a borderline hopeful qualifier to being a dead cert qualifier to, I think, genuinely being in contention to do really, really well on Saturday. I think depending on what sort of draw they get and position, I think that's Ireland are one that we should all be scared of, quite frankly, in both senses.
I feel like Ireland are going to end up being that country where, because of how they announce the results in the grand final and they leave all the public votes to the end, I feel like Ireland are going to be the ones who might actually cause an upset somewhere. They're not going to win themselves, but I think they're going to get a lot of votes, and that will take points away from other countries. So I think Ireland could be a catalyst in the final. Yeah,
I mean, I think I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here because we've got enough to discuss just with the semi-finals. But I think what's going to be interesting this year in the finals. A lot of the front runners, televote wise, aren't necessarily going to be big jury players and vice versa. So it's not going to be like it was last year, where you kind of had Loreen, who just romped home with all the jury and was always going to be kind of top 5 absolute minimum at televote. So you kind of knew everyone else was going to have their work cut out to catch it. This year, it does feel like things like Croatia and Finland and Ireland are all going to do really well on the televote, but how I don't know how the juries are going to respond to those kind of songs. So it's going to be a really interesting result session on Saturday, I think.
Definitely. And you mentioned about staging a few minutes ago, and so I want to know, what were the other standouts? Was there any staging that particularly impressed you or really disappointed you tonight?
I mean, I loved Poland staging. It was an absolute mess, but I loved it. It was real. I read on Twitter, I don't know how true this is, but it's to say the same person behind the staging of that was also the person who did the 2 trumpets for Embers, which explains a lot, if that's true. But it was a lot of kind of ideas being thrown at it with no real kind of cohesion. She was sort of striding a giant red horse at one point, which I absolutely loved. But yeah, it was kind of an endearing mess. But I think actually that the one country other than Ireland who really stood out for me staging wise was Ukraine, because they just had a very kind of simple staging concept. there was like a bit of big rock on the stage, and Jerry was just kind of like traipsing up it very kind of determinedly, and there was some kind of sort of slightly messianic imagery going on, but it was just so incredibly well executed. And I mean, I love that song anyway. I think that song is beautiful, and I think they had such a beautiful combination of staging and performance and song all kind of together. So I think, again, you can't ever rule out Ukraine at Eurovision. They're so good at it.
Mm. Yeah, they've got the formula down for Eurovision, and you're right. They're always. It would be a surprise at this point if they ever didn't qualify, I think. But talking of staging, I think one of the real standouts in the highlights reel is in terms of oh my god, like I need to see the full performance of this. Is Finland?
I knew you were going to say
that. From what I've seen, it basically looks like the entire performance was based around Windows 95 man looking for clothes, and was that a fair reflection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, basically, the whole thing was that he was wandering around looking like he had no pants on, but obviously he did have pants on. And they'd blocked the whole thing so that there was always something kind of comedically happening in front of him that was going to block seeing his genitals. And the thing, I've been on a bit of a journey with that song, because when it won the national final, I was like, oh, this is leaning too hard into the stupid comedy gimmick thing, and they're trying too hard here. I don't like it when people are making it that much of a joke. And I've been on a slight journey with it because I watched it tonight, and I was like, you know what? Actually, I'm laughing my head off at this because it's so willfully stupid. But no one is kind of trying to make this anything that isn't. This is a joke entry. They are having a laugh, and that's fine. And and that will, I think, that will do very well on the televote on Saturday night, because particularly when people have had a few drinks, they'll just be like, wee. But yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot to look forward to when you see that one in full, because it's just daft and crude, and all those sorts of things that make for memorable television, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, talking of memorable, and probably going in completely the opposite direction. So the UK performed their song for the first time this year. The Big Five get to do a performance during the semi-finals. We're obviously very aware of the UK because we're from there, and we want Ollie to do well. It doesn't seem like he's really going to crack it this year. But what was the performance like?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, again, I've been avoiding spoilers as much as humanly possible. Obviously, I've seen some pictures, and a lot of people have kind of said, who'd been at the rehearsal performances, that kind of the trifecta of Ireland into the United Kingdom into Ukraine was kind of the highlight of the night, and the thing that was kind of everything else was measured by. And I kind of felt that the United Kingdom was the weak part in that. Actually, I thought vocally we were not great. There were some quite iffy moments there, and the staging, I wonder if we've slightly over-egged it. I think we've almost gone too hard on the staging. I think no pun intended, but I think we've gone for such a kind of like an in-your-face piece of staging, and really trying to make something out of it. And I wonder if that's going to end up slightly putting people off, particularly if we don't kind of pull the actual performance back and get that under control, because it felt like we put all the attention on this huge dramatic upside down, round and round, camera shaking piece of staging, and actually the performance at the heart of it was quite wobbly. And if I'm from another country watching that, I'm thinking, well, you've got your priorities wrong here. So I may have kind of completely misread the mood of Europe on this one, but I was watching this one thinking, I don't know if this is the right staging for us. And I'm happy to prove them wrong. I really hope it does well. But I was sort of sat there feeling slightly disappointed when I watched it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm yet to see it live on stage, but it feels like we're going to be disappointed this weekend. But yeah, I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think one of the things I wrote in my notes was that it was all fur coat and no knickers. So, although kind of it was all knickers and no fur coat. If you
Yeah, exactly. So, besides the UK, which I think is probably going to disappoint us at the weekend. Were there any other performances, either from the Big Five or from any of the qualifiers, that were just a big letdown?
Yeah, I think I'm struggling to sort of find much to get excited about with Germany. I'm not a big fan of the song anyway, and the fact that they appear to have literally a bin fire on stage is not a metaphor I would be leaning into personally. I think a lot of the ones that I was less keen on did fall by the wayside a little bit. Although then a few of them did get through. I mean, Portugal wasn't feeling that one at all. That one just felt very nothingy to me. I was very surprised that got through. I know it was on near the end, which may have helped them, but I almost sort of forgot that one while I was watching it. So
Doesn't bode
yeah,
well.
yeah, it will be interesting whether that one gets a little bit lost in the shuffle on Saturday. Will be interesting to be seen. I was pleased actually that although I had them down as non-qualifiers, I did like Serbia and I like Slovenia, so I was pleased they did get through. But then it meant kind of losing a couple of the ones that I was hoping to see get through. So it's always the thing that feels wild to me is that we've had this kind of 2 hour 20-minute show for the purposes of eliminating 5 songs.
Yeah, it does
5
feel
songs.
a little bit overkill, but I also feel like there's a kind of irony to like really celebrating qualifying, because if you're genuinely really like surprised, excited that you've made it to the final, it probably just means you've got no chance whatsoever in the final
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, I think so. That's the thing. I mean, obviously the ones that kind of are not worried about their places in the final is because as you say, they're tipped to do well. So yeah, but then it's always so hard watching that bit where because the thing that really got me when they were announcing the results was they kept cutting to Poland and just seeing Luna's face, and she wanted it so badly. You could just it was written all over her face, and I felt so when as the kind of things went on, I was like, I just don't think there's room here for Poland to get through. I just don't think of all the countries that haven't got through yet, and we were left with kind of Luxembourg and Australia and Poland all vying out for the final slot, and I was like, it's going to be one of those 3, and I don't think it's going to be Poland. It's probably either Australia or Luxembourg.
And on that note, I mean, are we starting to see the appeal of Australia wear off? And is it viable for them to continue competing at Eurovision if they're not guaranteed a place in the final?
I mean, you raise a good point there. Actually, I mean, I think their participation this year had a big question mark hanging over it for a long time, and I think a lot of people were really rooting for them. I really liked the song. I thought there was an absolutely beautiful vocal on it. The staging unfortunately was a mess. I mean, it was very kind of end of the wedding reception, and I think that hurt them a little bit, perhaps. But yeah, I think you say about the sort of the love affair ending with Australia. I think the thing that's hurting them slightly is that they've never been particularly strong in the televote, other than kind of once or twice. And they've always been very strong with the juries, and that's had to kind of shore up their underperforming in the televote. And then obviously now that the semi-finals qualifications are televote only, they haven't got that to fall back on. So I did think, given where they were in the running order this year, I thought they were actually in a fairly good spot to get through. So I was quite surprised that they didn't. But I did kind of have that slight vibe when I was watching of like, I just don't know if they've done enough. So yeah, it will be interesting because I think it is, it's difficult logistically for them. But then at the same time, a lot of, there are countries dropping out of Eurovision and not returning. So I imagine the EBU will probably want to keep Australia in if they can, because they don't really want, they're getting alarmingly close to sort of not being able to justify having 2 semi-finals. So
yeah, and I think one of the problems is, as you kind of pointed out, is that they're only getting rid of 5 songs, which makes competition for those last couple of spots really actually quite fierce, I think, because you end up with a lot of favourites and quite sort of dead certs that are going to get through, and then the last few are sort of scrambling for that kind of last place or two. How much does the sort of running order of the show impact that? Because I noticed this evening you had Ireland and Croatia performing very close together. What does that do for the chances of the songs that are either side and in between them,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that we seem to have quite a confident start to the evening, and we had quite a strong end to it. And it was a lot of the songs in the middle that were kind of got a bit lost in the shuffle in the end. I mean, I think we had, you had Ireland, Lithuania, Ukraine, Croatia, all on very early, and then we went straight from Croatia into Iceland. And I was like, I didn't rate Iceland to get through anyway, but not going straight on the heels of Croatia because it just didn't hold up.
Yeah.
And that's a shame for them. But it's someone's got to go after the big hitters, and unfortunately, it was their turn.
Yeah. So sorry, Iceland. But
Yeah, better not next year.
well, yeah. So in terms of the show itself, so I saw from the when all the voting's happening and they've got all the bump going on and the stuff happening between to sort of fill the time basically while people are voting. There was an odd mid-show bit. They were really going in hard on the fact that Sweden and Ireland had equal Eurovision trophies, and they brought on Johnny Logan. Was that right? Is it Johnny Logan?
Yeah, Johnny Logan.
Yeah. Who performed Euphoria, which Loreen obviously won with Sweden with in 2012. That was an odd moment.
It was. I mean, it was kind of like the Magic FM version of Euphoria, wasn't it? But I mean, it was. I think it was a really nice thing to do because it kind of obviously Loreen winning twice not only took Sweden level with Ireland in terms of number of overall wins, but it also meant that he's no longer. Johnny Logan's no longer the only person to have won Eurovision twice as a performer because now Loreen's done it as well. So that to me felt like a really nice kind of gesture of no hard feelings. You did it first, and you'll always be a Eurovision legend. Why don't you come on and perform one of Loreen's songs for her? I mean, someone on Twitter was saying that they hope semi-final 2's got Loreen doing "Hold Me Now," which I am very here for if that happens.
Yeah, that would be great. I feel like they're probably holding Loreen for the final, but
with ABBA.
Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Hologram ABBA, of course. But yeah, in terms of the other show elements, one thing that was new this year that I'm assuming they're going to do on Thursday and on Saturday, but won't be as much of a surprise, was the big reveal of the green room. Now, I don't know about you, but I loved that.
That was a great piece of telly, wasn't it? Because you didn't really think about where the green room was, and then suddenly the stage just opens up and there it is. I mean, it was just brilliant. And that I think is again, it's just a sign of why Sweden is very, very good at this. They know how to kind of take the slightly dull bits of the show and do something interesting with it.
Yeah, and I think over the years, because I mean, when you look at the Eurovision timeline of 60 odd years, the kind of introducing the green room as an element within the arena is fairly new. And over the years, they've gotten a little bit more creative with how they've kind of incorporated that into the arena. But I think it's gone next level this year. I really loved that reveal.
And the fact that it's difficult to incorporate the green room when we've only got two hosts, because we've normally the standard now is to have kind of 3, occasionally 4, but you sort of knew when Sweden were going back because they've Petra did it by herself the first time, and then she did it with Måns Zelmerlöw the second time. So I was kind of like, they don't need 2 people to help Petra Mid out. She knows what she's doing. So I think that she and Malin are going to be really busy on Saturday, but I don't doubt that they can cover it all between them.
Yeah. However, I think on the whole, it seemed like the show itself was really well put together this year. And if the grand final is if tonight is any indication of what to expect in the final, I think it's going to be a really good show. I love the arena. I was a bit skeptical about the cross-shaped stage, but I think that works really well. I think all the elements are there.
I'm a bit lukewarm on the cross-shaped stage. I think I think we were sort of saying here that I think it slightly forced some acts to incorporate things they probably didn't really want to incorporate. They all kind of had to have something happening on the floor. And you could sort of see that some people had kind of done their national final performances with an idea of what they were going to do at Eurovision, and then got there and was like, oh, it doesn't work on this stage, we're going to have to do something else now. So it was fine. I'm not against it. I think it worked really well for some. It worked less well for others. But it's an experiment. You gotta keep mixing it up and trying different things. And I think for the most part it was absolutely fine.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they don't have a sort of ampersand-shaped stage next year, because there'll be all sorts of accidents with that.
I mean, we're gonna have a hashtag shaped stage at some point, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it's coming, isn't it? Yeah, hashtag Eurovision. So yeah, okay. Let's get some sleep and get ready for Thursday. But before we say goodnight to everyone, Steve, remind us who were the qualifiers and
Yes,
who
I was
lost
going to
out.
say, should we quickly run through? So the qualifying
Yes.
acts are in order of announcement: Serbia, Portugal, Slovenia, Ukraine, Lithuania, Finland, Cyprus, Croatia, Ireland, and Luxembourg. Those are our 10 qualifiers from this round. That does unfortunately mean that the ones who didn't get through for the first semi-final were Australia, Poland, Iceland, Moldova, and Azerbaijan. And I'm still gutted about Poland. I'm sorry. I liked Poland.
All right. Well, I think I'm for one. I'm glad Ireland got through. I'm glad Croatia got through, and
Yeah.
I think the final is shaping up very nicely indeed.
Yeah, and I think the second semi-final is probably the more competitive of the two, so I think Thursday night is going to be really interesting.
Mm.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Liam, for joining me this evening. I think you're very right that we should both go off and get some sleep now. We will be back. We'll be doing another live reaction show on Thursday night, ready to go up on Friday morning. So do make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast platform if you haven't done so already. You can follow us on our socials at bingewatch_pod or me at Stephen Perkins, just to make sure you catch all of our exciting updates over the course of this week. But until next time, good night, Europe, and good morning, Australia.